Today we are really quite excited to think about how we can bring virtual reality to former meetings and create kind of a new reinvented online meeting format. I briefly want to share a quick note that we have held 2 webinars about that in the past. So on the next slide, you'll see that we hosted a webinar on how to take meetings and workshops online. That was our most popular webinar last year. And in that, Cal from Tandemic explained why you just can't take a meeting from the real life and move it one-to-one virtual without changing anything. It's a very good webinar, I'd highly recommend it. And then we ran another one on virtual technologies and introducing them in a very jargon-free way for beginners who have never heard of the technologies before. We ran that in collaboration with UNVR, and I was really excited to learn back then that there is such a thing as UNVR, and featured case studies from the IAEA and DPPA, the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. And today, in a sense, we're going to take the next step and combine these 2 webinars into one and see how we can apply VR to make virtual meetings more interactive, interesting, and hopefully fun as well. So we had hoped to run this webinar as a meeting to at least allow a little bit more interaction. And ideally, we would have liked to do it in VR, but we weren't sure if the numbers were going to allow it. So we're back in Zoom again. And on the next slide, you'll see we will once again use the Q&A functionality of Zoom. If you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can vote on other people's questions. You can ask what you're interested in and help us prioritize it. Because it tends to be such a popular question, yes, the webinar is being recorded, and we're going to share it in our webinar library, where you can also find the other 2 webinars I briefly mentioned. And now I'm very happy to hand over to our presenters. We are today joined by Tom van Beeke. He's the Chief of Learning Innovation at the ITC-ILO, and that is the International Training Center of the ILO. And Marina Petrovic from UNDP. She is with UNDP in Istanbul and is an alternative finance and technology expert. And those of you who joined us last week for our conversation on blockchain, you may remember Marina from then. So thrilled to have her with us again in such a short period of time. We're going to start with a couple of presentations up front, and we'll then leave plenty of room for Q&A afterwards. And Tom, you've agreed to kick us off. Thanks for that. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, John, and also thanks a lot for setting up these interesting series, as they really tap into what currently is trending topics, I would say, also in the larger UN environment. And to all 67 participants, good morning or good evening, or wherever you are now in the time of the day. I'm Tom van Beeke, Chief Learning Innovation of the International Training Center of the ILO within the UN community. If you have ever been in Turin, the 3 agencies here, UNICRI, UNSCC, UN Staff College, and then also ITC-ILO. That's a little bit the training hub that we are in, and I'm working here with about 20 staff on learning innovation towards new learning methodologies, new learning technologies, and also on digital media and design. And it's specifically in this middle cluster, learning technologies, technology-enhanced learning, where we incorporate this kind of VR dimension. And that's also where Joanna asked me to share some of our experiences in the world of VR and how we basically apply it to learning and training, as we are, let's say, a learning center. So that's in a nutshell who I am. And you already mentioned VR, or VR. Actually, I've used it here as a kind of a quick slider, because VR is not new within VR itself is not new. It's already, let's say, more than 30, 40 years old, but it has accelerated a lot. When I looked at the beginning steps of VR within the UN, I remember with the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon that was launching all these kind of 360-degree videos so that you could be empathic with, let's say, one day in a refugee camp. And there's plenty of these videos around. But when we look where we were then and what is currently happening within the UN community, a lot of different things have happened. What I will say about VR is very much connected to learning. I really empathize with Joanna on the Zoom fatigue, WebEx fatigue, team fatigue. I'm also very fatigued by it. And this was actually one of the reasons that we didn't want to be separated by screen anymore. We wanted to basically talk and being immersed in a same space. So not just behind the screen where I could do anything else than, for example, listening into a webinar, but I wanted to be really inside. That was one of our first, let's say, motivations to explore immersive spaces. The second element was that, I mean, we work already a lot with blended learning trajectories, which I would say look a little bit like this, because now that we're not allowed to travel and that it's also practically impossible, we have this kind of hybrid trajectories, you know, where we give people access to e-learning content, you know, all your learning management platforms, where we do plenty of interactive webinars, whether it's a Zoom, Teams, or anything that you use. Sometimes even here locally, we still have some face-to-face meetings, very limited at the moment. And here we said, can we add a fourth component where we use VR? So VR not just to replace what we're currently doing, but to add on a kind of extra element that could create, let's say, added value. And one of the big lessons learned in VR, and it's actually with any technology like that, it's not just about like you using another gadget like here. I mean, I have about 2 of these. I don't know if you can see them. I think my background is installed a little bit wrongly, but this is my Oculus Quest, which is actually always laying on my office desk right now. But as I said, like, it's not about just purchasing a new headset and then doing something new. It's doing something with a completely new mindset. And to explain a little bit what I mean with that, I've used a little model that for us is quite important. Comes from a little bit from some technology learning specialists. They said, like, look, if I would use virtual reality just as a substitution, so basically it would be just a new digital layer or experience, then probably we are not really focusing on the added value. You remember 10 years ago when Second Life was introduced, where basically everybody went into this virtual reality atmosphere and was doing exactly the same as what we were doing in the real world, in the face-to-face world. So all kinds of universities, training campuses were set VR, and you were at the exactly same boring experience, sitting in an aula, watching to a presentation. And that's where we said we have to engage more than just in the substitution level. We need to see where we really can transform the learning experience and do something in VR, which we before could not do. And this is our vision actually nowadays. Some of the tools that I will show you are doing things that are practically unimaginable with, let's say, normal face-to-face or anything what you could experience there. So for us, that was an extremely important element. Secondly, when we talk about VR, there's maybe another slide that I should show first. I'll do that immediately, because when you talk about VR, my colleagues were a little bit confused. I mean, they had seen VR in a museum or with some of the cousins who was doing some Oculus Quest gaming. But I said, like, how can that be used now in a professional context? So when I gave them the overview of what we have in virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, they were a little bit overwhelmed with the amazing amount of possibilities that are out there. So we had to first sit with our colleagues and say, like, look, these are the different elements that are possible. And what we're going to do is now focus on one particular element. So at that time, they started to realize, oh, VR is not just about these 360-degree videos, but there are many more applications, interactivity, collaboration, and communication. So for the sake of this presentation, as I really want to move into a conversation later, I focused on one tool that we call Immersive Meetings. And Immersive Meetings, we are using a tool which is called Arthur, but there are many others out there. There is Spatial, there is Engage VR. I can give you a whole list of service providers that are active in this field. And for us, as I said, to go beyond Zoom fatigue, we wanted our senior management also to meet in VR. We wanted to do some simulations in VR. And currently we have, I think, 5 different projects running in VR, purchased more than, I think, 150 headsets already that are being pouched globally to our duty stations and so on. And that's the story that I wanted to quickly share with you. So when we talk about having these kind of immersive meetings, it's really making things that we could not have before, because in these immersive meetings, there is spatial context, there is kinesthetic things that we can feel, touch, there are 3D models that we can actually transform. I can actually look from a bird eye perspective, which there's no law of gravity. So when we use these 3D virtual environments, it's not just to sit in a VR and then watch again a presentation or an expert saying something. It's really the interactive type of modality that we have in mind, where the VR really could add value. So we call them the learning affordances here, which are interesting to see what can we do with VR that we could not do before. The most difficult thing, as I will call the teach as you preach principle, I'm talking about VR without that you can experience it right now. So in Zoom, what I would say right now, I'm going to move from, let's say, a video right now, which is going to give you a little bit more insights in it. Just double checking, Joanna, can you see the video right now?
We can see it, yes,
okay,
and now it's on full screen.
So just 2 minutes to give you a little bit of what happened here in the last 6 months in VR with these immersive spaces. So have a look at it.
Virtual reality is one of the essential building blocks of our digital ecosystem, and we're therefore able to roll it out on a larger scale in early 2020 in response to COVID-19. VR for us has a high market potential because it provides you with an immersive learning experience. So you dive deep into virtual reality in a three-dimensional learning experience, other than, for instance, in distance learning where you connect through the screen.
It is a tool that provides the recreation or replication of a digital environment which replicates almost identically a real-world environment. Therefore, human interactions are definitely fully augmented, and the learners requires to be fully immersed in that type of experience, and therefore it's definitely more effective.
Immersive meetings that we're currently doing in VR, they're just the start of a much longer strategic VR journey. So the focus will be mainly on innovation. That's one important point. And a second point, not only innovation, but also on inclusion. We want to make sure when we scale it up and when we reach out, that we also make sure we include everyone. So not everyone has headsets available, but we also want to make sure that our VR and augmented reality initiatives are also accessible, two-dimensional, whether it's on your computer, on your mobile device, or on your laptop. And that's what the near future will hold.
We were posed with this challenge of transforming a face-to-face meeting which involved about 100 people, and when the pandemic struck, we were wondering how to convert sharing those work that is done in the small groups in the large plenary. What was great about this was that it was immersive. They were able to discuss, they were able to create models in 3D.
When you are training in virtual reality, you can defy the laws of gravity. That means you can do things, importing files, building three-dimensional flowcharts, for instance, that you cannot do in the training room. So it has great potential.
It can be a complementary value, and therefore it can contribute to the creation of memorable learning experiences.
So let me go back to the presentation and a few more slides that I would like to share with you. So that was, in a nutshell, let's say, gives you a flavor of what we have done in these kind of immersive meetings, what we're currently doing. What we see now is that we're trying also to reach out to other partners. At this stage, what we are doing together with the World Food Program, the logistic cluster in there, is also their emergency training is also put on hold due to the COVID crisis. So they were looking, is there a VR space where we can recreate a few of these settings so that we can add it to the Zoom meetings that are going to replace the different elements. So here what you see is basically a reconstruction of an airport that has been constructed, and also 6 of these camps in a humanitarian setting, where now, I think in early March, the training or the simulation that they will do with the facilitators will take place, or partly a few sessions in there. So that's where we are right now for immersive meetings, trainings, and simulations. But what is interesting is that now, for example, once these headsets were pouched to all our duty stations or the projects that we are busy with, we said this is more than just a gadget, because here you see our training director, what we have now come up with. For example, he started to use it for running some of his senior management meetings, because he said, like, look, has extreme advantage. Our meetings are now reduced to 1 hour because that's the maximum amount of time that you can stand up in an immersive reality meeting. So now even some of the team retreats, because it's something new, I mean, doing team retreats in a Zoom thing is extremely boring nowadays. So I said like, well, why don't we do our special events not also in an immersive space? So more and more applications are now developed that we before didn't think about. And then where the really interesting part is that we're now building our virtual reality portfolio, which you can see on virtualreality.itc-ILO.org, where other applications are now also streamed towards our Oculus devices. We're currently working with Body Swaps, which is a startup in the UK, where you can actually train soft skills by taking the perspective of someone else and having that experience basically in your headset. So it's a completely new way of looking at specific situations. And here we are working on 2 topics, on gender inclusion and also on inclusive leadership. So it's not you use the device for multiple purposes. Or with our labor inspectors in Qatar, we came up with a new company, also Immersive Factories, where these inspectors now use it to identify occupational hazards and so on. So the whole spectrum that is out there is quite wide, and we saw it as the beginning of a VR journey, which we piloted, let's say, a few years ago, but now, thanks also to the pandemic, accelerated, and now actually the investment that we have done in terms of innovation becomes quite substantial. We're in the phase of scaling up, which also has a lot of challenges. Not only, I said the VR is the less challenges, more, let's say, how do you support that in terms of logistics, maintenance, support. So it recreated also some little reorganization in the teams that I have allocated to that. I promised to Joanna not to go beyond 10 minutes because it's very difficult to see someone in front of me here. So I don't know whether what I'm saying all makes sense. So I would suggest, Joanna, that I stop it here, and then after the presentation also of Marina, that we can go from presentation towards conversation. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tom. Very, very much appreciated. Great introduction. Looking forward to learning more later in the Q&A. If you want to take your screen down so that Marina can pull her slides up, I'll just use this one moment to say thanks to everyone who joined. There was an update to the invite that was sent yesterday. I'm not sure if everyone got it. Just to avoid that going forward, you might want to sign up to the UNIN mailing list directly. Then you receive these updates directly to your calendar, and avoid someone, if someone forgets to forward the meeting to you. And in case you missed some of the webinar, I just wanted to say again that it is being recorded, and we are going to make the recording available later on, so you can catch up later. And final announcement, we are using the Q&A for any questions you might have for our presenters. It's at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a box. Feel free to pop any questions that you have in there, and we'll come to them after this next presentation from Marina from UNDP. Marina, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you, Joanna, and thank you, Tom, for the presentation. I also learned a lot, so I hope that my presentation will also be very interesting and engaging. Okay, guys, so hello to everyone, and I'm Marina, and I'm from the United Nations Development Program, and today I will present how UNDP is using strategic innovation in technology to address development challenges and SDGs. I am part of the innovation team from the Istanbul Regional Hub, and I'm also co-founder of the UNDP Alternative Finance Lab, some sort of the internal UNDP startup that deals with different innovative finance and technology projects for development. So, okay, today I will try to present you in 10 minutes the PAA, or to say Presence Anytime, Anywhere project that we did last year together with UNDP country of Zimbabwe, Colombia, and CDO, Chief Digital Officer. So, okay, how we started. So 1.5 years ago, we started with asking ourselves, how can we transform the future work for UNDP? What basically this means? How can we collaborate and communicate more effectively? How can we enable informed decision-making in this new distributed reality? How can we ensure that everybody is connected? Basically, to say, we try to explore next generation of computing, collaboration, and communication technology that could enable us in UNDP to work faster and better in more places while reducing cost, risk, and environmental impact. The end thing that we produced was PAA, or again, Presence Anywhere, Anytime, Anywhere. And we create an XR, or Special Computing Technology strategy for UNDP, a product, which is basically a platform, and a service that we create with different companies with whom we worked last year. Okay, what is also important to say is that we try to thought about and to think about new and transformative identity of UNDP, who we are, and basically what is our role in development. Is XR, VR, AR, AI fields where we would like to go or where we need to go? And then COVID happened, and basically the answer was very straightforward. How we started. So exploration of AR, VR, XR is not something new for us. We started to explore this, let's call it crazy technologies, 2 years ago when we started to work with a company called Magic Leap. Magic Leap is also one of the headset companies, headset like for the special computing companies, but they're also providing a platform where you can find different applications. So we started to work and explore the work with them in 2019. We even created an immersive presentation called Climate Change Spares No One, which was presented during the 74th General Assembly, together with our administrator, Achim Steiner, who basically recognized that the project and the tech could serve as a future of UNDP. So here we are. The project was funded by the Chief Digital Office and our leader there, Robert Opp. And so the last year we were exploring, okay, what is special computing? What is XR? What is AR? What is VR? So when we started, there were no models for development. The only thing that we could see were the models for, let's call it immersive markets, for the games, for the health industry. But something for development was really, really new. So we started to explore two things. The first thing was 3D data storytelling / visualization. And the other thing was remote co-presence or the virtual office or the missions. So just to say, they're like slightly same, but they're different things. What does it mean 3D data storytelling? So basically we're using huge amounts of data. And a lot of times, specifically when you need to be fast, when you need to get to fast decision, you need to have a person from Oxford or the data scientist to tell you, okay, what actually this data means. But if we can find good technology that will help us to recreate or to communicate from huge amounts of data, a visual representation, then maybe we could also have better decisions, faster decisions. And of course, all of us know how important this is for the COVID times. So we started to explore this one. And also we explored at the same time, remote co-presence or the virtual offices. We know that UNDP and all UN organizations, we are very dependent on travels. We go on missions, we go back and forth. But what happened when COVID happened? Like, what does it mean for us? Should we stop with our work or should we reinvent ourselves? What is the new identity of us in UNDP and us as development organizations? So we're trying to see, okay, can technology help us here? Can we take the best practices that we see from the game world, from the movie world, from the immersive world, and bring it to us here? So this is, of course, our administrator, Achim Steiner. He was also playing with this. And I think one of the things to say, and I'm trying all the time to explain to people, what is that? It's hard to explain. You really need to feel it. You really need to test it. You need to see what does it mean, this new reality. Sometimes we're really programmed by the words, by the languages. But once you come to this new immersive environment, you can see what it means. And I think also very good to say is, can development be fun? Can we really bring one additional note to that? So these are some kind of very basic explanation. What is virtual reality, augmented reality, and special computing? I assume everybody knows what is virtual reality. Augmented reality, it is Pokemon, if I can say it like this. Special computing, it is Matrix. It is when Morpheus comes to Neo and downloads the whole application and says, okay, you can now play with karate here. That is special computing. It's creating in digital world, digital applications. While augmented reality, for example, is like you're taking digital applications and you put it into the physical world. So these are some kind of basic differences. Why? Again, to go back to our first use case, data visualization. So probably you can see from spreadsheets to special information. Can we really make, by using this technology, everybody a data scientist? We cannot do that. But I think it's important to empower people, to empower governments and people with whom we work so they can create better and more faster and more accurate decisions. Okay, so this is some kind of the results that we had. So we create around 35 immersive storytelling visualizations with this new software and with a company called Flow Immersive. We have more than 50,000 people watching our presentations and our this kind of immersive storytelling flows during the UNGA and during the other important UN events. We have 14 UNDP practitioners that are currently being educated how to use it, how to become the experts in this field. And we have around 1,000 people that joined from different headsets and from different, let's say, outside environments on our flows. This is a small project that we did also with UNDP Zimbabwe. I can also now show you how it looks, the immersive storytelling. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you, Marina. Marina, just to say there's no sound on the video, but I think we can just read the subtitles.
Okay.
Alternatively, please feel free to voice over if you prefer.
Okay.
So Marina, you might need to give us a quick summary.
Okay, sorry. So basically what I showed was, how UNDP Zimbabwe was using 3D immersive storytelling to translate the data that they received from the informal markets in Zimbabwe. So they tried to see, okay, who was mostly hit with the COVID? How the female entrepreneurs were reacting on this? Is there anything in terms of the goods that was more sellable? Can we really create more immersive, so kind of more better decision making by using data visualization, so we can help the end beneficiaries, so we can tell to them, okay, go there or try to sell this, or so we try to create so kind of very useful tool for the government. So once they start with COVID-19 socioeconomic recovery, they can say, okay, here's the data. We can see here very visually what is happening with informal markets, who was mostly hit, what is with the food price of certain products like cabbage, like tomato, and where to start with the recovery. And this is a kind of the end product. So I'm just going back here. Yes, also the flow, so our 3D immersive storytelling was also presented during the opening of the General Assembly with our administrator, Achim Steiner. And this is some kind of the product and the results, and so kind of the next step for 2021 in terms of the remote collaboration. So we did also, and I will show you this product also. We created UNDP so-called virtual office, where we met with UNDP Colombia and their partners, and where we use this place to interact, to engage, and to create some kind of, connected teams that are like in 3D format and communicating and interacting around each other, but are basically sitting on their tables in Croatia, in Istanbul, in Colombia, and in New York. And I will show you this product. So what is happening with us and what's the kind of our next steps? We are continuing with exploring. We are trying to find new use cases. I think the beauty of working also with us, so kind of the innovation lab and the hub, is that we are working hand in hand with the companies. So we were working with Special, with Magically, with Oculus, and with other companies where basically we're creating with them a new product. That's why, again, we're trying to go hand in hand and really open a new field for these companies, because I think they're also interested in seeing, okay, how their technology could be deployed in developing countries for development efforts. The next project I will show you that we did together with a company called Special.io was also presented in Mashable, in Bloomberg, in Forbes, and it was presented as some kind of the future of development. Yes, and this is how we see the future of development. We don't have to be maybe at the same place during the next General Assembly, but we can also maybe be immersed into this kind of immersive environment. And we can have a feeling and experience as we are sitting next to, for example, David Attenborough or anybody else that will be there present in New York. Again, the future of UNDP, so we are exploring. I think also very important to say is that big part of our exploration and product development was how to create products that are not tied up with the headsets. Like, you know, do we really need to buy for everybody headsets, or there's some kind of technology that allows us to manipulate the data and to show the data through mobile phones or through the web browsers? So we also did that. So all of our products are also seeable and visible through mobile phone and the web browsers. Yes, and I will just show you now in 1 second how our other product looks. 1 second, I will just go stop sharing and I will share again. Share sound. Okay, it's here. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Okay, so that is that. And just to say, we did this with amazing team from UNDP Colombia, Juan David and Alejandro Pacheco, who I think Juan is also here with us today. So it's also good maybe to hear his experience. So yes, that is that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Super interesting. If you and Tom want to come on video for the Q&A, please feel free, and encouraging everyone who has questions to pop them in the chat. I saw a lot coming in already. And I want to start before we get too much into the technology and how to make it happen and how to support it, etc. I wanted to ask you maybe an obvious question with an obvious answer, but how do users respond to it? What is the feedback that you have received? Do colleagues like it? Are they confused by it? Do they say from now on everything should just be in VR?
This is a good question. Thank you, Joanna. So this is the thing. So we did not want to bring, you know, the crazy products for the market and say to the colleagues, okay, here it is, just use it. The big part of this was adaptability, like learning how to use it, learning, you know, not to go only with the headsets, with Oculus or with Unreal or Magic Leap or HoloLens. It was like to see how to use it also through the mobile phones, through the web browsers. So adaptability is very important for us. And at the same time, we did massive research on different, again, headsets and the things that will happen by the end of the year, because completely new headsets are planning to arrive on the market, which will be more lightweight and so on and so forth. So this was also one part of the journey. But again, all of our products are accessible and seen, and they can be seen through the mobile phones, through the web browsers. So this was like the first thing. And then the second thing was how to use it through the headsets.
No, I like the question also because one of the things that we saw during the pandemic, when everybody had to move basically towards the webinars, it was funny to see a lot of colleagues, and specifically the more, let's say, digital immigrant type of colleague that faced a lot of issues with the webinars, you know, the mute, the unmute, and all the other funny jokes that we make now about it. When we moved into VR, we didn't have that. I mean, it's when you set up the Oculus, you enter in the kind of thing, it's much more intuitive. Of course, there's a little bit of onboarding, but in terms of adoption there on the headset, we had actually a funny experience. Like people liked it quite a lot in the beginning. Where the major change is how are you going to use it right now? You're going to use it just to talk and listen into presentations, and people are a little bit, yeah, once the wow factor of the technology is gone, then also, you know, people are going to get quite easily tired of it. So here again, it's like in any learning, the design of what kind of experience that you would like to have is the key successor, whether people will like it or when not. And then, like any technology, you have also always the early adopters, the laggards, and the kind of thing. At this stage, for example, we have trained about 15 of my colleagues that also train other people inside of it. And it's a mixed, let's say, adoption rate. Some people really are flying with it. Others are using it very limited as part of their blended learning trajectory. So I see a kind of phenomenon which is quite similar with all the other technologies we have integrated out there. But in terms of user adoption, I think the experience once you're inside of it is much easier than when you're separated by screen and when you need to start to pull on buttons and technology features that are not immediately visible or hidden behind your screen. There, what you see is basically what you get in its most purest form. So that would be my answer to that question, Joanna.
Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate you elaborating. And I think with that, we've also answered a question from Miriam from UNESCO, who was wondering if you needed headsets or glasses or if a PC could work. So Miriam, I think the answer was it works on a PC as well as on a phone, but the real experience might be best on a computer. Coming to our colleagues from IFAD who have a question. I'm going to unmute you. I don't see a name, but CDI IFAD Innovation, if you'd like to take the floor and ask the question yourself.
Thank you, Joanna. It's me, Gladys. I'm sorry, I couldn't rename myself. I'm interested because IFAD is currently renting out other platforms, not virtual reality, but similar kind of technologies for meetings and actually for the governing council that is taking place as we speak. I would be interested in learning whether is it possible to rent out this technology from you guys, and how much is for an agency? How much did you spend in developing this technology, and how long?
Okay. Marina, you want to go first, or?
So we can both clarify. In terms of the, so for the UNDP, we bought 10 headsets. We have 10 Magic Leap headsets, and the idea is basically to roll it, you know. So we are currently listening to different country offices, to our colleagues who want to use it, and then we are just sending it, and then we are testing with them. Before, of course, buying a big bulks of everything. So this is one thing that definitely can be done. And also in terms of the platform with special, this is also something that could be done. It's good to get maybe in contact later so we can set it up. I also have we also have some kind of internal database with more than 35, there's different flow immersive data visualizations, which is basically SaaS software. So we can also play with that. But I think the best maybe is to get in contact and see do you need hardware, software, and then from the software is the immersive storytelling, like the data visualization, or you would like the collaboration platform or the remote office. So sorry, Tom. Yeah.
No, I agree with Marina, because the landscape is so big. If you would just do a public bidding or a procurement process on any of these kind of elements, you would see a lot of variation in there. So to make it very practical, okay, a headset is now available at $300-400, but then somebody asked, I'm going to connect it with another question, the security question. Suddenly we started to adopt Oculus Quest, for all our operations, about $400, and then we realized that there was an obligatory connection with a Facebook account, which is against our institutional policies related to security data and so on. So we had to move up towards an enterprise edition, which is about $900 for a device. And then some of the organizations said, well, that's a little bit big if we have to now purchase about 40 of the devices, investing 40,000 euros for a training is not really sustainable. So that's basically by iterative feedback, we changed our model now that we go into a kind of a leasing or rental type of format, so they can use it for 1 month, but that again had an influence on our logistics, because we need to pouch, we need to sign off, we need to support. So it's a little bit as learning on the go and searching a lot, and that's only on the hardware question that I'm now doing. On the software as well, there's many models as there are applications. I mean, some of the things that I've given in the Q&A, you might do some free tryouts on these spatial arters, Engage VR. I mean, I can give you a list of 10 applications, but then once you want to structurally integrate it into your, let's say, courses or meetings or thing, then you need to see what is the most feasible for our thing. We are currently working with 2 or 3 different UN agencies on these kind of projects, where we have looked together what is the most easy, sustainable also in the long run? Is it part of your future strategy, or is it just, you know, a kind of a flagship event where you want to do something innovative and then it is? And I must say, through the acceleration specifically of the hardware, it becomes more and more accessible. I'm going to share with everybody a study that was recently finished on PricewaterhouseCoopers on the effectiveness of VR, with a very much specific focus on soft skills training, but some of the things you can also reason out loud. And they did a whole basically study on the cost, the return of investment, the different models, and they compared it also with e-learning, with face-to-face learning. So I'm just going to put it in the chat if I'm allowed to do that here, and I'll give it back to Joanna right now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tom. I was really happy to see that the UN is moving towards a sharing economy. I find that in itself very innovative. I would like to give the floor to Peter from UNHCR. Peter, you should be able to speak and ask your question yourself.
So I think this question was partially addressed, but I was curious, looking at the technology, what your experience is with the current limitations to accessibility, like VR sickness or people with disabilities, impaired vision, because I think you mentioned partially you can move part of the workshop outside of the VR environment, but the question is, short of improving the technology, what was your personal experience? And kind of to expand on that question also with digitally non-native generations, what do you think? You mentioned that inside the environment they're very comfortable, but is it also realistic to expect that they could be independent in the sense that there doesn't need to be an IT assistant that will set up everything and they just put on the headset, but could we move to a place where they actually can manage that on their own?
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, Peter. I think, again, it's a complex question with like a few elements that I want to, the kind of known, how do you call it, sickness, VR sickness of being too long exposed to it. A lot of research has been done to it. It's also something sometimes very personal, but it has an effect. For example, what we are doing, our VR interventions are always very extremely short. It means that's between half an hour and 1 hour, and it's sequenced in time to avoid, usually you stand up in a VR, it's not you're sitting in a chair, so you need to take that into account. In terms of inclusion, extremely important, because here, if you would exclusively go with a VR type of strategy, you exclude already some specific people with that cannot see and so on. So you have to have a kind of a mixed strategy in there on how you can go about it. And funny enough that there's a lot of VR applications that are about inclusion towards gender, towards inclusion, towards diversity, that you want to get another perspective, but sometimes they forgot that the target population of that should also be included into the methodology. That's why we always mix it over different type of modalities. And also, I mean, somebody asked the danger aspect. Also, these things we had to learn, because normally with our immersive meetings, you can run around, but in order to make sure that you don't run against a wall, we had people to demarcate the area, which is a safe space, which they can move with their hands and run like that. So for us, there was a lot of learning. I mean, there's too many questions out there. Instead of saying, let's not wait, let's find the answers ourselves in the kind of a safe experimentation zone of our innovation hub here. And then what works, we can basically scale up to a larger event. What does not work, we probably need to revise. And that's on all the challenges that the questions I've seen that could go to security, that could go to data, that could go to the hardware, that could go to any difficult question on there. For us, it's a kind of beta process, work in process, but progress, but we are also ready now to scale up here in our organization.
Thank you, Tom. Moving to a question from the Learning Solutions team, and they were wondering whether virtual platforms like that work well for colleagues with low bandwidth or unstable internet connection. Very important question, given that so many of the UN colleagues are working in field duty stations where the connectivity may not be as good. Mm-hmm. What are your experience there, Tom and Marina?
So I can just tell you, like, for example, that we did, so one part of the pitch for us was exploring how can we work with the country office from Syria and Somalia, and we did the testing there. And at the moment when we did the testing, we were in the office in New York, and we saw that basically these guys had a better connection that we have. and there's some kind of the thresholds, different thresholds for example, for the Magic Leap, and for this headset or that headset, and everything is good because we forget that we basically, so this is also a question that could be divided on two parts. One part is, for example, if we work with UNDP country office in Somalia, on Syria or somewhere, then it's okay. They have better connection that we have. But if, for example, these guys want to go and work in the field, then this is something also that could be, for example, addressed with mesh networks or something else. I don't want to now say out loud, but it is not as before. So technology is really evolving very fast. They're creating a lighter, better, like some kind of better adaptable wearable devices. So I think, I understand this is like very important question, but it's not. We saw that there is not some kind of problem connected with that.
We have a similar experience. It's important to have connectivity because otherwise, with Oculus Quest or with Arthur, it would simply do not work. And for example, when we had the lockdown, talking about Italy, a lot of colleagues were working at home in apartments where suddenly the connectivity was becoming a kind of an issue. We found the solution very easily. We disconnected if the Wi-Fi was not strong enough to cater for the thing. People connected it with their mobile phone on a 3G or a 4G type of device, and then it works. For us, the rule of thumb was when you can do a Zoom conference, you can also do a VR conference, and that has been our intuitive measure. If I would ask to our IT specialists, they would give me exactly also the amount of bandwidth that you would need, but we have solved it like that. If the current Wi-Fi network was too low, we connected it with a mobile device that they had, that usually had also for their work. And now with World Food Programme and some other things, we are going really to remote distance duty stations. So also there we will be able to report what works and what does not work. But I would not use it as an argument, like any argument, okay, connectivity is an issue, so let's not do it. Let's do it, and then let's resolve the connectivity issue in a parallel way. Otherwise, it's very difficult to move on with innovation.
Thank you, Tom and Marina. And just throwing in there randomly that I've actually had some of the worst connectivity ever working in New York.
Yes.
I'd like to go to Johnson. Johnson, you should be able to unmute yourself. Welcome.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for the presentation. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Loud and clear.
Okay, excellent. Hi, I'm Ma from WHO, and my team and I had worked on a VR project last year. We used the Oculus Quest 2 to teach basic life support. And we are obviously big believers of VR and its future for health. For example, we are thinking of utilizing it for learning, telehealth, mental support, communication, and so on. So my questions are, what are we doing as UN to create the awareness of VR technology and communicate its potential to all our UN members to make it more mainstream? And also, it comes to my second question, and that is, are we also exploring the potential risks of VR in terms of security, privacy, biases, or even physical danger? I mean, things that we may not see now, but potential risks of VR technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Johnson. I can show you just one second. I don't know if I have it here, like what we did. It's a great question. It's a great question. Just 1 second to show you, and I don't know if I'll be able to open it up. Oh, it's here. It's here. It's here. It's here. So I don't know if you can see my. If you can see my screen. Yes. So this is the special computing cookbook and a handbook that we did, where basically we try to collect all of our experience and also experience with what you said, like wearing the headsets, any kind of the other problems that, we did not think about because it's really a new thing for us. And one of the things that we are also exploring there, and I can share later with all of you, the cookbook, and it is like still in a draft mode, so sorry for that, but I think maybe it will be also good and handy, where we try to explore basically how, there's some kind of unexpected difficulties and how can we address them. what I can tell you from after 2 years basically of exploring, there's a lot of things on which we currently do not know the answer. And not the answer, we do not know the question. We do not know the question. So I think having, for example, the webinars, as Joanna and innovation team are doing really amazingly, having discussion with you, sharing the experience, blogs. I think also for us, for example, was very important that we were published in Mashable, in Forbes, in Bloomberg. So this kind of things also bring the adaptability within the UNDP, because then people see it. Sometimes it's also harder for us to communicate things inside of our networks. But for example, putting the link, from Forbes or Mashable, this creates a change. And also this creates some kind of the new opportunity for the other companies that are working in XR, AR, VR world. So they can see, oh, look, there is an opportunity for me. Look, there is something new business model. So I think we're really in the nascent stage of development of this, and a lot of questions still need to be asked. So I think it would be good, after this webinar, if there's any kind of community of practice, that we all stay connected, and then, just write our own experience, like some kind of the live documents, share it, give feedback back to the companies, and say, okay, you should do like, headsets instead of like this. You should have something, that is good for Syria, Somalia, or something like this. So I think this is some kind of a learning experience where we are giving the feedback and we are also shaping up the product. But a lot of questions still need to be asked.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm more or less in the same mood as Marina there, Johnson. I think on your first question, raising awareness. Well, first of all, I think UN Innovation Network is doing an excellent job because, really on the spot, bringing people together on these topics, that's something that we do. Now, maybe I'm going to say something strange. I think when you want a strong digital, let's say, project, you need to have a very strong analog foundation. And what I do mean there is that our awareness raising within our own organization, which started, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago, and maybe I have to share something to make that a little bit clear, started basically, funny enough, with face-to-face events on virtual reality, where people really were in a safe zone, where they actually experimented here. This was something we still had done before, let's say, the massive lockdown in Italy. It was in February 2020. We invited about 10 of these VR companies, partially online, partially in space, where people had the possibility to basically try it out, talk with other colleagues, and address all these questions that you have here. We have seen that actually accelerated the adoption rate very fast, because it was not anymore, let's say, the toy of some IT geeks out there. They saw, wow, this could specifically in occupational safety and health have a very meaningful thing now, specifically with the pandemic, that will accelerate still for the rest of the year. So that would be my first kind of device, because there's so many questions out there, what Marina has mentioned. And these questions, it's only through iterative experience, feedback loops, that you start to create your own answer, because there's not, let's say, a scientific answer on any of these questions out there. The second thing that we have started to do is basically set up almost design labs, what we call them, a little bit inspired by a lot of different innovation techniques, but on a journey on how could VR add value for your organizational objective, project objective, whatever it is, like an iteration of 2-3 days, also online right now, where they come up really with a strategic project, and not just, we're going to create a 360 movie about how it is actually here to create some awareness and empathy. So also there, and not, let's say, the early adopters of the innovation unit, but really people from a specific project that don't have the VR kind of background. And there our most strong projects get, growing. And I think that's where we really will be able also to scale up. It doesn't remain in the innovation hubs. It's really also for other people to use it. And as always, like in any innovation, some things work and some people really drastically fail as well. Don't be afraid to also incorporate that element. But on your second question, maybe very short, I already raised the security, the data, and the other issues. I invite you also to touch base with our IT chief on that one, because they have some specific answers. But I think it's going, also Marta mentioned, it's going to raise new questions. The first time I was working in the immersive environment, we were there with a group, and actually some avatars became extremely close to each other. It was like a kind of a new form of digital harassment, by way of speaking, that it was not done on purpose, it was not intentionally, but somebody felt uncomfortable that someone was trying to jump on him or her. But that was, you know, a thing that everybody was like a little bit flabbergasted. And then, okay, what does that mean? So that's a question. Do we have a case here of harassment or not? Was that someone that quickly lost control over the joystick on that one? And so we get into new questions, and not only on security, on safety, but also on ethics, on element, and it's time also on rights, you know, like that we should move into this area of, well, and not just in the experimental mode of answering some of the more practical questions. I think the connectivity, the security questions, they are technical questions, you can solve them, but the more difficult questions on how are we going to behave, how are we going to interact, communicate with each other in a very virtual space with not the laws of the physical world, what is going to be our answer? And that answer we only can find collectively by doing these experiments collectively, by doing more events together, and also because we're still talking about some budget. It's not about €1,000 here, it's budgets that could go from 60,000 to 200,000 by way of speaking. Probably also there we need to piggyback to basically work together so that we can easily find a return on investment, and so that our decision makers, including ourselves, find is also a sustainable way of dealing with VR, and not just jumping on the VR hype because there's now a lot of traction due to the pandemic or independent of the pandemic. I'm pretty sure that our center will invest in VR even more also when the pandemic is done, not just because of the pandemic. We started, as I said, 3 or 4 years ago, not just because of the pandemic.
Thank you, Tom and Marina. Lots of interesting new challenges that I think none of us were prepared for. And I like the approach of let's experiment and let's keep on trying to overcome them. And also thank you, Ma Johnson, for the question. Much appreciated. I would like to try and get one more question from our colleague Tim in. But before I give him the floor, I just want to say I heard that, or I'm sensing there's an interest to engage further. And while I'm not sure UNIN can commit to establish a community of practice, I'd be very happy to host another, like maybe more informal session, a meeting where we can dive deeper into some of these conversations. There's no fixed agenda, but really just for colleagues who are interested in the VR space to get together, meet and exchange views. So we'll include that in the follow-up to this meeting. And with that, I hope we have time for one last question from Tim Miller. Tim, you should be able to speak now.
Oh, great. Hey, thanks. I was just wondering what the users report in terms of the advantages for using the VR technology over AR in terms of data visualization. Because I'm just thinking that the AR has a lot of advantages because everyone's got a cell phone. So that's good. You're good to go with that. But I'm just wondering what's the big advantage for data visualization? Thanks.
What is the advantage for data visualization?
In using the more advanced or more resource intensive VR versus just the easier AR.
So one of the things, maybe I can show you this. 1 second, if I still have it here. 1 second, I can maybe even show you now how it looks. So what we did, so basically it is like one of the advantages is first that you can transfer huge amounts of data and create a visual representation. So there's some kind of automatic software that basically takes 2D, which is, you know, sometimes boring, you get lost. I cannot personally read it because I'm not educating, you know, in science direction, in science data direction. And for example, I need to really understand better what is happening, and I need to create a business model, or I need to create a development decision or government political decision. And I just take this data and I put it in the softwares, the smart software connected with AR, VR, and I get the visual representation of everything that was 2D in 3D. And then I can understand, I can read it, I can also interact. So for example, not only me, but few people, not few, 30, 50 people can interact with the same visualization. They can change it. They can create in the real time some kind of different graphs and predictions. So there's some kind of multiple purpose use of the data visualization. Specifically, for example, we work with Flow Immersive. And what these guys are doing is amazing. It's really top notch, not only technology, but some kind of the innovation, from the innovation perspective, top notch like innovation model. it creates completely different way how we interact with each other, how we can use the data around us, how can we respond to data. So again, I can show you after this, I can show you now. I'm just trying to find it. Okay, or I can just maybe open, if I can do it like that. I can open, maybe it's here. 1 second.
Maybe while you search it, oh, no, go for it. Yeah.
So it's different. So, okay, you know, I don't want to now play it. So from one company, there's some kind of visualizations. I can later, after this call, I don't know, maybe through Joanna or something, we can share the booklet, we can share the 3D data storytelling that we did, and then you can play with that, and you can see, and you can also like, so kind of bring your data into this software, create something for yourself. It is something, so, you know, I think we still need to find some kind of the words in development, how to describe it. But I can tell you definitely from this perspective of Zimbabwe, instead of, again, engaging new data scientists, then doing some kind of different levers and layers of the data management, manipulation, they used one software, and the person from the government presented, you know, the visualization. He was in front of that. He was really an expert in the things, you know, that were showing behind him with data. So it is some kind of new business model with which we can definitely empower the people with whom we are working, and ourselves also.
Yeah, and Tim, I think your question of whether AR or VR, it's also a question that we have been struggling with, and that's why we're actually now partnering up with 8 different companies, because each specific question requires a different approach and a different kind of element. And some people say, yeah, for example, I'm showing here, we're working with body swaps, one of them, on, you know, how to change your behavior by shifting perspective. And it's a very immersive experience when you do it in an Oculus or any headset thing. But they said, okay, we also make it available on a mobile device in case you don't have. It works, but of course, you do it with a headset because it's so immersive. So there will have an effect, and it's, you know, compatible, so to be more inclusive and so on. But the reason why you want to be immersive is also use the technologies that support it. So I think we work in different ways. And what I see, for example, specifically with AR, we use augmented reality quite a lot in the whole section on what we call TVET training. So all these vocational training centers, they use it, partnered up with Aeon Reality, who has a massive database of more than 10,000 AR objects in different disciplines that you can actually use. But also that's more for our classical e-learning training, where we integrate it into the self-guided e-learning models and AR kind of component. And it works for those 2 sectors, and they basically love it. So, but again, this is not said we go AR, we go VR, or we go mixed realities. It's really making sure that the VR ecosystem that we have built within our center can cater for different needs, for different technologies, for different kind of things. And that's it. We are not VR developers ourselves. We're just trying to tap into what works and what is actually meaningful for our target audience. So it's not an either, it's an and kind of answer that I would give what is the most easy. And then I really liked what Marina was showing on these data visualization. I also want to dive a little bit deeper into that. It reminded me of Hans Rösling with his data visualization, that suddenly also with Gapminder started also to use these augmented reality data visualization. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but that was the inspirational move that I said we need to do more with tangible data in an augmented reality set. Over to you, Joanna.
I'm not sure if anyone else is also thinking of the Matrix right now, but that's certainly where my mind is, and soon we'll be there. Sorry, it wasn't the Matrix. What was the movie I'm thinking of? Well, never mind. Thank you, Marina and Tom. This has been such an interesting hour. You're painting a really interesting future that the UN is, I hope, going to. I hope we're going to see more trainings, events, conferences in VR very soon. Thank you to you and your teams for spearheading that work. And we'll be sharing a recording and your contact details, as well as any other material that you mentioned, with colleagues on the call shortly after this. If there's interest to engage informally in the coming weeks, we'll try and set up something, just an opportunity to continue this conversation and make sure it's not a once-off, maybe the beginning of something. And with that, really big thank you to Tom and Marina and your teams for sharing all the work that you've been doing. It is so appreciated.
Thanks a lot, Joanna.
Thank you. Wishing everyone a good day. Thanks for joining us. And